within 60 days after receipt of the planning director's recommendation on a draft community development plan or any amendment thereof, the Windward Planning Commission shall transmit the draft community development plan or any amendment with its recommendation through the mayor to the county council.
Thank you, Chair Clarkson. Good morning, Planning Commissioners. My name is Bethany Morrison. I'm a long-range planner with our planning division in the planning department, and I was also part of the CDP project team. I also live in the planning area and am honored to present the Hamakua Community Development Plan to you today. So that was the draft of the CDP. The next phase was really to get that broader input from the community and stakeholders. They had the same opportunity to review the draft, and the steering committee used that input to make further revisions before it finalized the CDP. After reviewing the comments, the CDP project team and the planning director saw additional opportunities for strengthening the CDP. The planning director's recommendations refine language to provide clarifications in intent and implementation of the policies. For example, the recommendations changed shall to should for policy 8. The changes in the verbiage were based on input from Corporation Counsel to provide clarity and not to be confused as mandates. Since the intent of policy 8, which you can read in the rationale document in your binder, the intent was to encourage and incentivize clustering development as an existing planning tool and to provide some flexibility in site planning. So because the intent was to encourage and incentivize, this was not a mandate, and the recommendation would be then to remove the shall language. Similarly, the recommendations changed shall to should for policy 22. Again, this was to provide clarity on the intent of the policy to provide guidance for preserving agricultural lands during the planning director's review of consolidation and re-subdivision applications. This was to provide guidance again, so that's why the language was changed from shall to should. To summarize, the rationale for these changes was to clarify the distinction between policy intent and policy control, which I explained previously in the presentation. The director recommendations also deleted policies that were made obsolete due to clarification or changes to the state law since the steering committee finalized their recommended draft. This included prohibiting cesspools, developing clustered rural subdivisions, and allowing farmers markets on ag land. Finally, the planning director's recommendation added a new policy 39 to develop inland cliff setbacks, which was a policy gap noted during the agency review. Please note that this is a county action, which, as noted earlier, would require separate research and analysis to identify the draft strategy that would need to go through another public review process. The CDP project team then provided the planning director's recommendations as an update and overview to the steering committee on February 26, 2018. The steering committee heard testimony from members of the public and had the opportunity to ask questions and engage in discussion. They discussed the recommended changes that I just outlined, as well as some of the other non-substantive revisions that were presented. The draft minutes from that meeting have been included in your Exhibit 16, where you can read the specific discussions that were had. The planning director recommends a favorable recommendation from the Planning Commission, including the recommended revisions based on agency review and recommendations, organizational improvements, and language clarification. Your binders include the recommendation, the background report that includes the CDP program, the plan elements, the planning process, and the CDP implementation that I have outlined today. And your binders also include several exhibits. The first exhibit is the most important. That is the Hamakua Community Development Plan that would be adopted. Exhibit 2 is the strategy rationale for that document. And so anytime you have a question about why a certain strategy was written a certain way, you can refer to the rationale for that discussion. Exhibit 3 is the revision summary, and the remaining exhibits are comments that were received. The next step for the document would be, after your recommendation is made, it will be forwarded to the County Council for review and decisions.
For the record, I would like to note that I talked to Commissioner Aguinaldo, and he has had a chance and has read the transcript from the April 12th meeting. At this time, we're going to begin our public testimony. We have 20 signed up. We're going to limit testimony to 3 minutes apiece, except perhaps for steering committee members, who I'm going to ask come up first and give the commission their reactions to the final draft CDP, and then we'll proceed with general public testimony.
Farah Marie Gomes, Vice Chair for the Hamakua Community Development Plan Steering Committee. I do not have additional testimony to provide today. I do want to say that I need to leave at 12:30, so if there are any questions of this Planning Commission, I would be more than happy to answer them at this time.
Brad Kurokawa, Chair of the Steering Committee, and not a whole lot to add. Most of you were present at the last Planning Commission meeting, and I'd just like to say, just to reiterate, that I'm really proud of the steering committee and the planning department and the process that we went through. It was a very thorough and transparent one, and we listened. I think we listened to the community's voices and have put forth a draft that we hope that you will move ahead. It's been a long haul of over 9 years, and we're ready to get on with implementation. So again, thank you very much for your opportunity, the opportunity to testify. Thank you.
My name is Michael Johnson. I live in Hakalau on the Hamakua coast. I'm a farmer. The name of the farm is Ono Gardens. And my testimony is around zoning of Hakalau Point and changing that zoning from industrial residential to open lands. And I recommend that we keep it the way it is, as industrial and open lands. And also the land down in the valley is zoned conservation. I would like to see that changed to agriculture. The plan is to have agricultural demo gardens demonstrating the Hawaiian plants in that area, so changing it from conservation to ag will help further that. My desire and my vision for the point is to see it continued as industry, as it has been for centuries. The Hawaiians used that land as their center of commerce for centuries, and trading and bartering. That was downtown in their culture. Then it was sugarcane from 1876 to 1974, I think it was. It was the center of sugarcane industry. I'd like to see it continue in this vein to honor the desires and guides of the community objectives put forth in this plan. The land is currently in the state designated as urban. In the county, it's designated as general industrial. And And the community objectives are to promote, preserve, and enhance a diverse, sustainable local economy. Changing it to open lands will not do this. The objective number 9 is to encourage the increase in diversity of employment, and changing it to open lands does not do that. The objective number 42, develop a distinctive identity for the Hamakua region to enable public and private industries. Changing this to open lands does not do that. Page 87, strengthening local agriculture. This section of the CDP guides efforts to strengthen the local ag value, agricultural parks, diversified ag-based businesses, and ag tourism. I took a survey and had a petition signed by over 72 local people that want to see it remain industrial, and I asked people what they wanted to see happen at Hakalau Point, and the number 1 thing they wanted to have happen was ag tourism. The number 2 thing was food production, food processing, which it currently does. It processes potatoes, it processes ginger, it can process coffee beans, and so on. So the process to turn it to open lands was a corrupted process, and it was brought up in a vote without alerting the public, and it was voted on for meetings after that, for months after that, until it was a unanimous vote. And I protested that vote, and many people protested that vote to turn it from industrial residential to open lands and get rid of the industrial zoning altogether. We were told that this wasn't about zoning, but it's all about zoning. And it's all about what the future use of this land will be. And what is good for the land is good for the people. And this land has always been used for centuries to benefit the people's local economy. And I'd like to see it remain that.
Thank you.
Okay, I'm Dave Longacre, and I live in Hakalau, up Chinchuk Road. I'm a farmer and a, excuse me, a reforester. And, you know, my take is that the CDP that's been presented is generally a really good document, and I think those who helped craft it really deserve a lot of kudos. But it does contain some serious contradictions in one of its most important objectives, which is the support of agriculture. And in particular, paragraph 4.5.4 asks the county to develop viewshed regulations. And it's followed by paragraph 4.5.6, which seeks to discourage what it refers to as tall vegetative windbreaks. And, you know, I can't find anything in the CDP that contains any real clear definition of what these viewsheds or viewscapes are, nor how enhancement or protection of them meshes with factors such as ag zoning, private property rights, state law, state statutes, or the protection of watershed ecosystems, which is something the CDP itself calls for. And so these paragraphs that I cited, in my opinion, I think they've set the stage for some kind of zoning overlay or a zoning change that could severely restrict current, as of right, ag land uses. And I think to take away a right is not something that most citizens or legislators should view lightly. And on top of that, Hawaii Revised Statutes 165, the state's right to farm statute, was crafted to protect farmers from the very pressures that something like a viewshed regulation seeks to impose. The fact is that the language about viewsheds or viewscapes, it's too broad, it's too permissive, and opening the door to sweeping legislation to impose significant restrictions on ag land use. Who's going to decide which viewscape or which viewshed requires protection? In other words, restricting what landowners in the line of sight of that particular viewshed can do with their land. And recognize restriction of private land uses in favor of viewsheds could be challenged as a government taking, and people could ask for compensation. My point is that attempts to weaken ag land use rights will be opposed, and that far from being a community document, that supports community. This could support community division, and it could end up in some sort of debate pitting neighbor against neighbor with nasty, bitter divisiveness, kind of similar to what happened with that ag lands rooster debate. And I should add too, people like me who have this perspective, we're not killjoy ogres. I love looking at the ocean and mountains, but I also recognize as a farmer and a forester that sometimes what you do on ag lands doesn't always accommodate the desire of, say, a homeowner or a home renter to have an unobstructed view of some distant site, like the ocean or the mountain. And in the end, I feel that if there has to be some language in the CDP about protecting views, only a restricted version that withstands legal scrutiny should be offered, such as perhaps protecting views of the ocean from identified public viewing areas adjacent to or Mackay of the Belt Road. And that's why I call upon you folks, please, in your wisdom, demand the moderation of this damaging language and resolve these flaws now. Don't kick it down to the county council. Thank you.
My name is Dwight Vicente, representing the Hawaiian Kingdom. For the record, the statement is not a sworn statement. The CDP is based on the Northwest Ordinance of 1787. These are not public lands. These are either Crown or government lands. And the history of the application of the Northwest Ordinance goes back to the 1875 Reciprocity Treaty between the Hawaiian Kingdom and the United States. For the record, the United States is only 13 states under Article 1, Section 2, Clause 3. There is no amendment, so there is no state of Hawaii. And the limits of the Northwest Ordinance in the U.S. Constitution is Article 4, Section 3, Clause 2. One can read Cy versus Clinton, 2011. The land speculation the kingdom did not allow because of the native tenant rights involved. Lands was only leased out. And if you look at the history, the leases was about to end in the early 1920s. So when they the U.S. Congress illegally created the Hawaiian Homes Commission Act, it was limited to 1.8 million acres. The rest of the lands was left out because they had plans on claiming they owned the lands, and that's why it's left out. So in the 1959 Admission Act, you can read that the fake state of Hawaii was given 1.8 million acres only, limited, not beyond that. So a lot of lands was left out. So, but anyway, the Admission Act is based on the Northwest Ordinance. Every element of it is based on that. So the lands are still Crown and government lands. We're still in the jurisdiction of the Hawaiian Kingdom. There's no state of Hawaii. The courts here are kangaroo courts based on that. They cannot make decisions over the Northwest Ordinance. Northwest Ordinance is limited to the courts in Washington, D.C. only. They're the only courts that have jurisdiction over the Northwest Ordinance and the U.S. Constitutional question over the treaty, the Reciprocity Treaty. So with that, I'll end with the reservation of the rights of this kingdom under the Queen's protest of January 17, 1893 against U.S. Minister Stevens. It has to make its way to the U.S. Supreme Court, Article 3, Section 2, Clause 2, original but limited jurisdiction only over U.S. Minister Stevens. The other question is whether the U.S. can extend the Article 5 of the Northwest Ordinance, which is Article 4, Section 3, Clause 2 of the U.S. Constitution, beyond the limits to include the Hawaiian Kingdom and beyond. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, members of the committee. My name is Steve Shropshire. I reside in Papai Cove, and I'm the owner of Hakala Point, which is approximately 8-acre parcel of land, Mackay the Highway. It was the same piece of property that was referenced earlier. I'm a fourth-generation farmer. I've spent my entire life in the ag industry. I currently have farms here that we have ornamental plants, tropical fruit, and other cattle operations. So I'm very vested in farming and agriculture. I purchased this piece of property roughly 15 years ago, and I bought it, and I've invested millions of dollars in this property. I bought it because I felt it was a very unique opportunity. It represents 0.1% of the available industrial land that's on this island. It's a very rare commodity. I started participating in the Hamakua CDP with my son. I attended over 20 meetings. As you heard earlier, it's a 7-year process. We contributed, we provided input, and we were very excited about our ability to use our property and make it available to really help fulfill the goals and visions of the Hamakua CDP, which includes promoting, preserving a sustainable, diverse economy, local economy, a lot about supporting agriculture and ag tourism, sustainable agriculture, farming, ranching, revitalizing retail, services, dining. Hakalau was once a thriving community. There were over 2,000 people that lived there. People tend to forget that. So I always talk about redeveloping Hakalau, not developing Hakalau. Unfortunately, what happened during this process is that after we participated in several meetings, there was the community, by the way, vetted this process, and there was a variation of the land use maps that were selected that all included the property's current zoning, which was a mix of industrial, residential, and open space. So although these four choices varied in the way they were laid out, it was consistent. That's what the Hamakua community wanted. At the last minute, the steering committee voted to strip the zoning in the land use policy maps to open. That motion was made by the chairman, Brad Kurakawa, who's actually the architect, landscape architect of the proposed park, which you're going to hear about later. Basically, what I want to say is, this is not right. It's not Pono. It's not legal, and I'm definitely going to defend myself. You're private property owners. I mean, why don't we take Waianaku Center? What's next? Why don't we take your property, your home, your business? This is not good land use policy, and this is what you're put here to do, is make these decisions on behalf of the community. And I strongly urge you, I beg you to really take a rational look at this, because taking people's private property rights away amounts to taking, and this is a taking, because there's no other word for it. And I'm going to defend myself. I've already spent $20-some thousand defending myself. This is crazy. I'm trying to do what's right for the community and what's right for this plan. Thank you.
Thank you. Are there any questions for these testifiers from the commission? Thank you. There was a lot of discussion in this testimony about the change in the LUPAG designation to open. I just want to get a clarification as to how the CDP affects existing zone designations, whether these actually immediately overwrite them, or whether these are advisory to the council in making possible zone changes.
I'm actually going to have Bethany address that. If that's okay with you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you for that question, Mr. Chair. In reference to that, I think the best way to look at that would be through the rationale document that's provided in your Exhibit 2. The Hakalau and Wailea communities are inexorably linked together in identity but geographically divided by Highway 19. Both are traditional plantation towns surrounded by working agriculture, with historic buildings on both sides of Highway 19. For the Hakalau coastal area, the CDP land use guide map designates the current LUPAG industrial area to be designated as LUPAG open, to convey the preferred land use for that area. Currently, the LUPAG industrial designation stretches across multiple parcels, including a county-owned parcel and several residential parcels. There are 3 shoreline parcels with county industrial zoning, one of which is owned by the county and contains the Steep Gulch and Hakalau Beach Park area. And the other 2 are privately owned and possibly intended for redevelopment. Note, while the CDP recommends changing the designation for these parcels to LUPAG open, the land maintains its underlying industrial zoning and its associated permitted uses. The CDP does not have authority to change zoning. Due to the site's proximity to the ocean and Hakalau Stream, this parcel is no longer seen as ideal for heavy industry, and therefore the proposed designation conveys that the county planning department would likely support a zoning change to a less intensive use, such as the LUPAG open. The designation of LUPAG open was chosen as the community's preference After lengthy discussions relating to protecting coastal resources, viewshed preservation, and a desire for preserving open space. The low-density urban designation is made to better align the state land use urban designation and to move the LUPAG urban designations away from the agricultural lands along Highway 19. Considering the infill potential with current land use designations, there is adequate development potential in the Wailea-Hakalau area to accommodate the anticipated growth without further encroachment into working agricultural lands. The medium-density urban area in Hakalau is removed and designated as LUPAG low-density urban. Since there are existing nodes of commercially zoned parcels in Hakalau and Wailea, it is not necessary to maintain the LUPAG designations for the types of density or uses that the LUPAG medium-density urban would allow. Again, while the CDP does not change the underlying state land use district or county zoning, it is the county's preferred land use for these towns to be revitalized at an appropriate scale to their surroundings. And the LUPAG medium-density urban designation is now seen as an excessive approach to small town development goals. In summary, the proposed changes for Hakalau effectively shrink the LUPAG low-density urban away from Highway 19 and the larger lot agricultural areas, and clearly define the town's urban border. They remove the LUPAG industrial designation along the coastal area, and they remove the medium-density urban designations to ensure that commercial development at the appropriate scale for the character and population of the town. Note, the CDP land use guide designations reflect the county's preferred land use for specific areas, but the CDP does not change the general plan LUPAG map, the underlying state land use district, or county zoning. Even if the CDP land use guide map recommendations are incorporated into the LUPAG, a property owner may still need to go through a state land use boundary amendment and/or county zoning process to ultimately obtain a land use consistent with this designation. However, due to the water system constraints in the planning area, county water system improvements may be required for a change of zone due to concurrency rules. In other words, a CDP land use guide designation or a LUPAG designation does not automatically grant a type of land use. It merely conveys that the county planning department would likely support this type of land use through a change of zone and state land use amendment, if all other requirements have been met.
Now it's clear to me, and I hope to the commission, that the adoption of this development plans, community development plan, does not actually change any zoning for any land parcel in Hamakua. Okay.
It's your recommendation.
Yes, it's the expressed preference of the community. I'd like to begin again with public testimony.
My name is Robert Nishimoto. I live in Ninole. I'm a retired program manager for the Department of Land and Natural Resources, Division of Aquatic Resources. I have a PhD in marine biology. I'm also an adjunct faculty at University of Hawaii Hilo. Our grandson is the 5th generation in Ninole. So we've grown up all our lives at mile marker number 19.6. I fully support acceptance of the Hamakua CDP because as Brad, as leader, really convinced me when he said, what's good for the land is good for the people. So this comes from someone who's really grown up and lived at the Hamakua coast. I'd like to also thank the steering committee. They're very kind, very transparent, and very open and willing to discuss all issues. So again, thank you. What I'd like to focus on is to support revised policy number 18, which says shoreline and building setbacks are environmental health and safety priorities. I've given you a handout. The first page is an outline of my presentation. I hope you have it right there. You got it? And second page is a picture of Hakalau Bay at mile marker 16. If you look at that picture, look at that insert January 2015, there was a huge landslide in front of somebody's property. I was out there fishing 2 weeks ago, and look at the picture in April 2018. Nothing has healed. Once a landslide happens, it's forever. It's forever obliterates. People talk about land rights. I understand that. But is this landowner going to clean up this? This is really a trust resource. This is our resources. I've cut an ace and nobody's willing to clean this trash up, but this habitat is gone and lost forever. Therefore, it's very critical, I think, the shoreline and setback should be very, very seriously considered. This is nothing to deal with, to play with. The second handout, I wrote about a story called The Lonely Life of a Hamakua Opihi. Those of you who like opihi as food, or those of you who consider it as a natural resource heritage, please read this article. I think it's try to explain to everyone what it means to all of us. Lastly, I'd like to say I'd like to encourage the continuation of a working relation with UHH Hilo has created a group called the Manager Climate Corporation. It's a collaboration between managers, county in this example, and academics at UH Hilo to develop adaptive capacity dealing with climate change impacts. I'd like to specifically praise the collaboration between Dr. Perroy for UH Hilo and your own Bethany Morrison from the planning department for guiding Rose Hart, a graduate student who did a great work on documenting historical and present cliff rate erosions. What it really does for me, it gives us a level playing field. As planning agencies, you always hear this crying about local jobs. It's about local jobs, but nobody stands up for environmental issues. This is our heritage. This is, once it's destroyed, it's destroyed. Think about that. Okay, we're not telling no development, just be cautious. Okay? So it provides that level playing field. So again, I'd like, as a planning division, we have our own backyard expertise. Please encourage this collaboration to go forward because it really helps us in our decision making. Thank you.
Good morning, and thank you for the opportunity to testify. I'm J.B. Friday. I'm a resident of Hilo. I'm a professional forester. I work with the University of Hawaii, but today I'm testifying on my own behalf, not on the behalf of the university. This is a great plan. It's trying to incorporate a lot of stuff, trying to balance a lot of issues as more and more people move up to the Hamakua coast. One concern I did have from it, and I want to bring out again, is the discussion of view planes. As people move up, they build their lovely house up on the hill, then they start talking about what their neighbors are allowed to do. As a forester, I love trees. I think trees are a good thing. I work with people planting trees both on an industrial basis and on a small but commercial basis that people are planting trees. But I also want to speak up for the farmers. Much of the land on the Hamakua is very windy. Windbreaks are necessary for productive farms. I know that you cite frequently Natural Resource Conservation Service in the document. They very much promote windbreaks for protecting your farms. So I have a concern about the view planes and how that could adversely affect the working landscape. And in particular, singling out windbreaks as a technology that you will steer people away from, I don't think that's appropriate. I'd like to see that taken out of there. I think for the view sheds, for scenic lookouts, and getting the county to maintain scenic lookouts to provide view sheds, that's a positive thing I think we can do as far as the view sheds go. Other points that jumped out at me from this plan was working with the Big Island Invasive Species Committee. I'm on the advisory council for the Big Island Invasive Species. Really positive to work on with BISC on all the issues that BISC is working on. Working with the Plant Pono thing to encourage planting non-invasive, non-native, and native plants with planting things. I appreciate the call out for protection of our forests from rapid ohia death, one of the main things that I'm working on. I appreciate the little fire ants. Little fire ants to me are the biggest threat that we have on the island for being able to enjoy our forests and our farms. And I appreciate also the discussion of working with the Mauna Kea Watershed Alliance. I think the Watershed Alliance is a great forum for coming together to manage the land. Thank you very much.
Good morning, if it's still morning. My name is Dana Cecina. I am a resident of Hakalau on Hanamala Loop down in the Hakalau Plantation Village. My husband and I are homeowners there and have just lived there since October. So this is kind of our first viewing of the document and how it's going to affect us and our community. We wanted to express our support of the document generally, but we do have a few concerns. One specifically that will affect us in Hakalau is the recommendation of the Hakalau Point to become designated as open zoning rather than the current industrial residential use. We would support it remaining industrial residential and to facilitate Mr. Shropshire in his planned development. We see it as a fantastic opportunity and for community development and really community cohesiveness. We are frequent visitors of the Papaloa Country Store and Cafe and see that as a beautiful shining light of what a small community economy can become. And we think that the Point Project has a lot of positive aspects that do jive well with the current visions of the Hamakua Community Development Plan, including supporting local economy, rural agricultural tourism, and revitalizing that retail, service, dining, and entertainment center within the Hakalau community. And thank you so much for listening to my testimony.
Aloha, my name is Jennifer Weinert, and I'm speaking from my heart and asking that you please accept the CDP as written. It is a reflection of the community's will over 9 years it took to compile it. Many meetings, much input from the community. I feel that as you do accept it as written, that you will be enacting harmony as opposed to division. I feel that if you listen to one person, one developer that wants to do something that none of the community wants, very few of the community wants, that you're going to cause huge division within our community. I do live in Papaico, between Papaico and Pepikeo, and I feel very strongly that I'd like to keep Hamakua as it's intended by the people that live there now. People that live there, people that say that they live in Papaico but don't really live in Papaico. No. So thank you for voting and enacting the will of our community. Thank you.
Good morning. Yes, my name is Zhou Guo. I'm living in Hakalau about 20 years. I'm a farmer. Actually, sweet potato farmers. I know recent 10 years, the sweet potato farmers in the Hakalau area get good developing. As in total, for Hamakua side, we get about yearly about 1,000 acres potatoes growing, and we ship, most market is mainland. We ship to mainland, I think about 80%. Even now, we ship into the mainland market about each week about 8 40-foot containers, some for locals. So, I will support the Hakalau. This is for keep for industry processing plant. You know, now our potatoes we ship to mainland or for fresh market. We need looking for different market too, not only fresh market. Sometimes if we get the same time get a large farmers harvest there, we should flat market. So we're looking for processing plant to different food for shipping out. So I'm really support this is industry and processing, any type of processing plant. Thank you so much.
Aloha, my name is Akiko Masuda. I am the owner of Akiko's Buddhist Bed and Breakfast in Wailea, and I would like and request that you accept the CDP as presented. Just a few very simple stories. I don't have any degrees or anything fancy like that, but I've lived in Wailea now for 27 years. So I've had a chance to meet our kupuna, our elders, and be with them when they crossed over to the Pure Land. When I first came to Wailea and lived there, I was encouraged to go to the Kumiai picnic. And we still have a Kumiai, by the way. And when I went to the Kumiai picnic in 1991, it was down at Kole Kole Park. There must have been 3 tables like this, loaded with food. And there was namasu and nishime and sushi and pancit and lau lau and potato salad, and you go on, and another 2 tables loaded with desserts. And most of the community at that time were local, mostly Japanese, but it was mixture, Japanese, Filipino, Chinese, some Hawaiian, and at least 70 people. And maybe after 8 years of going to Kumiai, it was always on the last Sunday of July, one of the grandmas, Grandma Chinen, and she doesn't say too much. She just makes a really good nishime and great potato salad. She came up to me and she said, Akiko-san, look, you see that boy over there? I saw him and he brought potato chips and dip. And look him now. He's loading his plate with all kind of food. And when go home time, he took plenty food with him. That's not right. So one of the things I learned right away is I had to speak about values. So I went up to the boy and I just said, you know, in Hawaii, generosity is a virtue. You bring plenty food, whatever you have, but bring plenty, and you share so everybody can take home and everybody has a good time. Thank you. All right, 1 minute left. So it's my prayer. I am not against development, but I would like very, very much to see that the people come in here and live in Hakalau settle. They don't buy a house and flip it or try to raise the value up, because most of my local friends cannot afford to live in Hakalau. I think I'm a near extinct breed there. There's not too many of us left. And I'm trying to find my own way so I don't grieve to death crying for our local people, is to purchase some land, little bit land, so I can provide housing and some work for 2 local families before I die. And I really hope Planning Commission or whatever keeps in mind that Hawaii is for our people, local people, and new residents, but we have to find ways to come with aloha and not just build big mega places. Mahalo plenty.
Hello, my name is Elizabeth Hansen, and my mailing address is Hakalau. I live about 4.5 miles away from the Hakalau Point. So first I wanted to address that. I was very concerned when I first moved here. My son, who's an environmentalist, said to me, well, Mother, when you move here, you have to make sure you take care of the Aina. You have to go to all these meetings, which I've tried to go to for the last 6 years. So I really respect all the things that have been happening. And I really hope that you as the commission support this plan, which I think has been very well developed and has a lot of community input. One of the concerns when we talk about Hakalau Point is that it's the first thing that anybody will tell you, it was an industrial area and it's loaded with arsenic. So one always has to be very careful what is doing when it is near the major setback for the ocean. And I just want to thank you for your support and hope you do support this program.
Good afternoon, Commissioners. My name is Pam Elders. I live in Laupahoehoe. You have a very tough job. I can see that. Part of your responsibility is to weigh the multiple land use issues that have, of course, come up in any community development plan and the conflicts that arise from that. The CDP that you have before you is the product of a 9-year community-based process of consensus. All stakeholders have had ample opportunity to try to convince everyone else of the rationale of their proposals all along the way through 9 years. And of course, as in any process, there are those who think that their interests are not being heard or served by the decisions that ultimately come out of that process. That being said, I think the overwhelming consideration of the community process was, to the extent possible, preservation of natural resources and agriculture. There was little support for more development, which would exacerbate existing use conflicts, and you've heard those throughout this process. I ask that you give due consideration and weight to the results of this process that you've heard today, and to uphold the plan as it is. The arguments about view sheds, additional setbacks, and development at Hakalau Point have been repeatedly vetted, discussed, argued about, and ultimately not affirmed by this process and the goals and visions that the community set out in the beginning. I hope that you will not heed sour grapes, threats, or promises when you consider this plan and vote to pass it along for approval. Thank you.
I live in Hakalau, right across from the subject property, and I am here to thank all of the participants over these 8 or 9 years for working hard to produce this document. And I encourage you to pass it the way it is. There's been many opportunities to discuss every side of every issue, and that's my position. That I just wanted to encourage you to pass it. Thank you.
My name is John Kay, and I also live in the same house as Julie Kay, across the street. We've been working on the CDP for about 6 years, and we came from the mainland, and I was shocked that there was this whole process going on. I'd never seen this on the mainland. I was really impressed, I still am, that people listen to the people who live there when it comes to major planning. I hadn't seen this before. Usually you leave it in the hands of experts, the planners, but to give the actual people who live there a say was an amazing idea to me. So we went to all these CDP meetings, and we put our input in, and we listened to others and so on. It's been going on a long time. And one of the things, of course, that's come up is this particular parcel of land at Hakalau Point. The Hamakua CDP makes it very clear, the general plan makes it very clear that what the community wanted was the idea to preserve the coastline. The Hamakua coast is one of the most beautiful places on the face of the earth, and everybody knows it. And tourists, when they drive down, they've never seen anything that looks like that, with the ocean views and the beauty and so on. So it made sense to preserve it. It made sense. And when the Hamakua CDP says things like the objectives are to encourage developments that are not coastal dependent to move somewhere else, that makes perfect sense because you have this resource. It also made sense to just protect the views, protect the beauty of it, and all of that. So what happens is this one parcel of land that we all know about has been very controversial in the sense that the community wants to try to protect that land as much as we can, as long as we can, and that's what's been going on. So again, I think the steering committee did an incredibly fantastic job of patience and everything else to weigh this thing out. I think the CDP makes perfect sense the way it is, and the only thing that bothers me is some of the comments that you will hear about threats. Again, this has been brought up a couple of times. We won't stand for this, we won't stand for that. And, you know, I just think you need to understand that the developer in this particular case bought it as industrial. He bought it in a special management area. He keeps it in a special management area. He keeps it industrial. Nothing changes. Nothing changes for him, and that's the way it is. Thank you.
Hi, I'm Ken Forbes from Hakalau. I had a little more here, but I think I can cut it down for you. I just wanted to make one point, just to reinforce a lot that has been said at this table. As you know, the Punk Commission is charged with prioritizing island-wide list of lands worthy of preservation from development. That's their whole purpose. And the commission rated Hakalau Point highly, and the county council voted to make an offer to purchase. The purchase didn't work out, and I have no problem with that. That just didn't work out. But my point is that the commission's finding and this community view that we're presenting to you is saying much the same thing. This is property that's worthy of preservation. And the petitions on Hakalau Point done at the time indicated that as well, about 600. Thank you.
This is our 42nd meeting dealing with the Hamakua Community Development Plan. We've looked at issues from all sides and heard many, many views and worked out hard points. There has been great consistency over time. I've said that before. I would just say one of the things that we took into account was Hawaii state law as it relates to coastal zone management. And I know you've heard a special presentation on that, but there is a particular section under program objectives and policies that says encourage those developments that are not coastal dependent to locate in inland areas. And that's what we've been seeking related to Hakalau Point and other coastal areas. So that's all I have to say, and I thank you all for your attention.